Hello and welcome to World Insight with me, Tian Wei, coming to you live from Beijing on CGTN. Coming up on today's program, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi spells out China's push for diplomacy this year. What does China's diplomacy push mean for the international community? And on International Women's Day, I get up close with the Chinese Consul General in New York, Ambassador Zhang Qiyue, one of the nation's top female diplomats. She is in tonight's Great Talk from the 2 sessions. And you're watching World Insight. The Chinese Foreign Ministry just wrapped up a news conference explaining China's diplomatic approach for the coming year. This is part of a series of ministerial briefings being held during the 2 sessions. Foreign Minister Wang Yi said China will foster a shared future with other countries in the new era of development. Take a look.
The year 2018 is the year decisions made at the 19th CPC National Congress are to be implemented. Under the leadership of the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping as its core, China will foster a new form of international relations and build a community with a shared future for mankind. Foreign Minister Wang Yi said President Xi Jinping has been fully engaged in China's foreign policy. His personal diplomacy has enhanced China's image as a major country entering into a new era.
President Xi has visited 57 countries in different parts of the world and received more than 110 foreign heads of state. These important visits and meetings go a long way towards deepening the world's understanding of China, enhancing China's profile and influence, and facilitating the solution of many global problems.
Wang Yi added that in 2018, China will host 4 major diplomatic events: the annual conference of the Boao Forum for Asia, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, the summit of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation, and the first China International Import Expo in Shanghai. In the year ahead, President Xi Jinping will also participate in the BRICS Summit in South Africa, the APEC Economic Leaders Meeting in Papua New Guinea, and the G20 Summit in Argentina. Foreign Minister Wang Yi also answered questions concerning issues on the Crimea Peninsula situation, the Belt and Road Initiative, and China's role in enhancing cooperation with the United States, Russia, Europe, and Africa.
As the world's largest developing and the largest developed country, the top 2 economies, and permanent members of the UN Security Council, China and America working together will benefit not just our own countries, but also the whole world. If there is any competition between us, it has to be healthy and positive.
Foreign Minister Wang Yi said the human society has now come to a crossroads of history. Should one opt for openness or isolation, cooperation or confrontation, win-win or zero-sum game? These are all the questions that countries are thinking hard about. And China's diplomacy in the new era has made it clear that China will work hard to contribute to world peace and development. Su Yuting, CGTN, Beijing.
For more on Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi's annual press conference on China's diplomacy in the year 2018, we are joined in the Beijing studio Yuan Peng, who is the Vice President of the China Institute of Contemporary International Relations. What a pleasure to have you back, sir, on our program. Good to see you. Also in Beijing, Einar Tengen, who is a current affairs commentator. Welcome as well. And in Washington, D.C., we're joined by Robert Daly, Director of the Kissinger Institute on China and the United States with the Wilson Center. Welcome as well. Let me begin with you, Mr. Yuan.
Thank you.
So, diplomacy in the new era, that is supposed to be the grand answer the foreign minister was providing to the world. Exactly what you have read out of the, rather between the lines, Mr. Yuan. What exactly is this new strategy?
Yeah, different people have different understanding.
What about yours?
For me, as an observer of Chinese new diplomacy, I think first of all, it's a 4-in-1 structure to understand this new diplomacy. Number one, I think the win-win cooperation constitutes the foundation of the base of our new thinking. And then our strategy is a peaceful development.
Got it.
Our periodic goal and the first phrase of the goal is constitute a new model of international relations. And the final aspiration goal is constituted so-called push for the community of the shared future of mankind.
All right.
So win-win cooperation, peaceful development, new model of international relations, and to push for the final goal, the community of shared future.
Sounds like a grand plan.
Yeah, this is the 4-in-1 constitute the new framework to do our new diplomacy. Everything is under those new framework.
This new framework, but it sounds like the community of shared future, quite far away a concept, but yet that has been mentioned so many times. So, Mr. Daly, what is your understanding? I mean, coming from Washington.
Well, it sounds a little bit different in Washington. I think that it is widely understood in Washington and around the
very
world.
Different?
Well,
very diplomatic today,
it depends on which
Mr.
aspect
Daly.
we're looking at. China is becoming richer and more powerful, and it's perfectly appropriate, it's inevitable, that China will play a larger role in world affairs, including providing more global public goods. At the same time, the list that Yuanpeng has just read, which I think is accurate from China's point of view, for Americans and many foreigners, these are vague, sort of meaningless slogans, which seem to imply that China is always a positive actor in international affairs. And of course, China, like the United States and other big countries, is sometimes a positive actor, sometimes a negative actor, depending on the issue and depending on where you sit. So these slogans don't provide real guidance for solving very difficult problems, many of which may not be win-win.
All right. Mr. Yuan, you want to respond to that? For example, compared to the slogan of America First?
Yeah, I think every country has their own slogan or doctrine. You have a Bush doctrine, Obama doctrine, or maybe in the future Trump's doctrine. For us, we have a new thinking, have a Xi Jinping's new thinking of our new diplomacy. I think which I mentioned from win-win cooperation, peaceful development, new model of international relations, and shared future of mankind and community. I think this is interrelated. It's not just ambiguous and just a slogan, because we conduct our new diplomacy under this new guideline. For example, global governance, global public goods, which Daly just mentioned. In the years before, we're not so positively, or not so good at in pushing this. But today, everybody can witness that China is very, very positively in pushing this, which embody a Chinese new global role.
All right. Mr. Tangen, you've been attentively listening to your two other colleagues. Let me go to you. I mean, it seems the Chinese side, according to the strategy explained by Mr. Yuan, is trying to incorporate the interests of the others or the rest of the world into the grand plan of China's own development plan by believing it has to be win-win. Is that something new when it comes to international relations? Or you saw similar examples earlier in history when it comes to the others who are rising power?
Well, it depends on how far you want to go back. If you want to go back
it totally depends on how far you want to go back, sir.
Well, we could talk about Rome, we can talk about Greece, we can talk
about
maybe
not that far. How about
everything.
Contemporary history? Yes, go ahead, sir.
Well, and quite frankly, I mean, what both sides agree is that China has sent a very strong signal that it is going to expand, and it's done two things which it has not done before, and I think it's trying to put the world on notice that it's going to take what it sees as a responsible role. Now, that might not fit with Make America Great Again, Donald Trump's version of how you're going to make the world more beholding to the U.S., but it is very strong. I mean, stationing troops abroad, that was something that was is different. Right. Also this idea of having joint defense exercises. This is also different. So I think China is trying to explain that everything that it's doing in terms of building its military, which is still only at 1.5% of GDP, is peaceful. It's not something which people should be taking as a threatening gesture.
Okay. Mr. Daly, we could debate about this structure for a whole night tonight, which could be also fascinating, but let's move on to some specific issues to see how this structure, if it is, could work for different kinds of international relations for China. Big power relations, if we use the phrase. China-US, China-Russia. Mr. Daly, you may listen very closely to what the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi had to say. He used several phrases. China-US relations, for example. He said, it could be an issue of good competition, but certainly not rival. Strive to be partners. That's the words and phrases he used. When it comes to China-Russia relations, he talked about the sky is the limit. And there's always room to develop better relationship between China and Russia. Certainly you see the difference, the approach that China has been taking so far. China, Russia, United States. So, Mr. Daly, your interpretation here, what does it mean for Washington?
Well, obviously the biggest source of uncertainty and even trauma and confusion in the relationship right now is Washington, is the ongoing political and even cultural crisis in the United States, where many Americans not knowing, from week to week what policy is actually going to be. And the unfolding example of this right now is the question about tariffs on steel and aluminum and what is actually going to be enacted by the administration. So I wanted to put that caveat out there, that all relations are a two-way street. I think that China right now has a clearer sense of its interests, values, and long-term goals than the United States. And so from that point of view, even Chinese positions that many Americans disagree with are, in a sense, a source of stability because we know what they are going to be. Nevertheless, this idea in the United States now that U.S.-China relations is fundamentally one of competition. The word used in the national security strategy was rivalry. Cooperate where you can, but more and more Americans see this as fundamentally as a competition. I would add that although China doesn't speak that way, China actually made a similar decision a long time ago that I think guides a lot of Chinese policies regardless of the way they are packaged. So the question is, can we manage a more competitive relationship? And I think that if both capitals were operating under their normal dispensations, that we probably could. This need not become an all-out competition. And in that I would agree with Wang Yi.
All right. Well, Mr. Yuan, I have to throw this back to you. According to Mr. Daly, I got the key word. He thought it is more about packaging than the real essence when it comes to China's word of choices to describe U.S.-China relations. What do you think?
I think you raised a very interesting comparison question, that the China-Russian and the China-United States relations. And then for China's new diplomacy, those two bilateral relations have the same importance, but different meanings. For China-Russian relations, we say we are enjoying the best shape in history because we have final resolution of border disputes. We have integrate our Belt and Road Initiative with Russia's Euro-Asian Economic Alliance. We shared many in common in international affairs. So that's why we are enjoying our same, period of a rise. While U.S.-China relations is also very important, but important is a more comprehensive and more complicated way, because American on the one hand is very good for China's rise of development, but on the other hand, given Taiwan issue, Tibetan issue, human rights sort of issue, also has some potential challenges for China. So it's more comprehensive, more complicated. So how to manage U.S. and China relations, which now is the very tipping point, is a very big challenge for Chinese new diplomacy. We once proposed the so-called new model of major power relations to want to shape the new relations. However, American side didn't echo too positively. But today, under Trump administration, we face another uncertain period. So how to overcome this uncertain period and find a new way to manage the most important bilateral relations is something, I think, most important task for Chinese new
Mr. Yuan, you know much better than I do that U.S.-China relations is not like Chinese younger, you can dance alone, but rather a tango that you have to dance toward one another, right? Interact. So it's really much depends on how your partners is working, if there is a partner to work with. Mr. Tengen, same question to you. Let's look at some specifics. Trade issue. Aluminum, steel, they talked about so much. It could be just a bargaining strategy, of course, coming from the Trump administration. Having said that, though, there are other issues that are much bigger. For example, DPRK issue and some of the other issues of common concern. The question is, China said, U.S.-China has to work together because we're not responsible for ourselves, but also the rest of the world. We are the biggest two economies in the world. But eventually, will the two countries, when they think about work together, think about the interests of the others? For example, from Washington, your sense here.
No. Make America Great Again does not include trying to help others. And unfortunately, it'll take a change at the White House and quite probably in Congress in order to change it. But given that it's changed, don't assume that it will change that much. I mean, there are many Democrats who are cheering this trade war or the idea of strong tariffs, where it was 100 Republicans who sent an open letter to the president saying, we don't like this. I mean, what you have here is, in many senses, the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, this historical book about three
very literal today.
three nations. The difference is that for China, it's less ideological than for the U.S.
Okay.
I mean, American exceptionalism is really driving the sense that only one outcome can be, and that's liberal democratic capitalism.
Okay. Mr. Daly, two things also throw to you as well. Concrete things like steel, aluminum. China said today already, China could respond. And of course it will be responsible and the justified response if actions have to be taken in reaction to the other side's actions. That's one thing. This is a specific issue, trade. Aluminum, steel. Another thing much bigger, Korean Peninsula, DPRK nuclear issue. So you see from specific to the grand, all of this seem to need some kinds of thinking and some kinds of resolve between these two countries. Mr. Daly, your sense here, can China's goodwill, at least according to Mr. Yuan here, work in Washington? If not, what are we looking at right now? What is going to be the reality that we have to face?
Right. Well, as I mentioned, there's tremendous uncertainty, particularly coming from the American side here. And we don't know what this administration will look like over its next 3 and perhaps over its next 7 years. America is still, in many senses, almost traumatized in terms of its institutions, its diplomacy, by the 2016 elections, and it hasn't settled out yet, so I'm not going to hazard any predictions. I would caution, though, that this is not yet a trade war. There is a possibility of a trade war, but a trade war means something very specific about mutually destructive, tit-for-tat responses. That's not where we are. Chinese imports to the United States, its steel imports, are relatively small. It's about 2.4% of all imported steel, so that this tariff, if it is enacted, will not necessarily have an enormous impact on China, which might be able to find other markets for its steel. Of greater concern is the next phase of American acts, which are aimed at trying to counter Chinese intellectual property rights infringements, and which are aimed at adjustments in the terms of investment to make the economic relationship more balanced and more reciprocal. That could have more impact on China. Certainly it's reasonable to think that China would also take actions to counter that. But we're not at a trade war yet. We shouldn't use that term lightly.
All right.
In North Korea, again, I think it's encouraging that it looks like there may be talks. We have had talks before. North Korea has also previously, not under this leader, but under his father, said that we would be willing to give up our nuclear program for security guarantees. We've tried that before. It hasn't worked. Nevertheless, I think that it should be tried again. I am all for talks without preconditions.
Mr. Yuan, DPRK issue we really need to mention here. China has been working on it since the six-party talks. Now the North, the South, and the United States seem to be having something cooking among themselves. Of course, China would love to see things work out. It would be peaceful stability. But what is likely going to be China's role? Is there going to be any China's role? And is that going to be a good thing or a bad thing?
China always play our own role and a responsible role. From six-party talks, we initiated, provide some platform years before, to the current initiative, Freeze for Freeze, and the dual-track initiative. I think China always consisted in pushing this. Today, I think North and South Korea meeting together and rapprochement improve their relations, even if they did not mention the Freeze for Freeze, but actually embedded spirit of a Freeze for Freeze, which is initiated by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. So that's why we are very pleased to see this kind of new improvement. But still, there are some uncertainties ahead, because so far, American, which is a very direct relevant party, still has a very high suspicious of what has been going on in the North and South relations. And we see that the South Koreans sending a special envoy to the United States to have a briefing. So we hope that this briefing can make some good effect. But so far, Americans' Marxism pressure policy and bloody no sort of military operation still on the table. So still, I think there are some uncertainties ahead.
Some uncertainty, to say the least, I guess, Mr. Yuan. But when you look at the whole picture of China's diplomacy, one would say, what exactly is China looking at when it comes to the huge amount of money it puts into it? If we take a look at some numbers in its annual fiscal report to the National Legislature on Monday, the Finance Ministry said spending on diplomacy would rise about 15.6% to 60 billion yuan. So that's about $10 billion US, while the defense budget will grow by 8.1%. So these numbers, some would say, what is China trying to do, putting so much money in foreign policy and diplomacy, trying to use the charm to sway the others? Mr. Tendon, what do you think? Is it going to be a Belt and Road making everybody happy?
Well, that is the hope. I mean, it's a win-win situation. I mean, we've talked about this many times. I mean, China is trying really a charm offensive, and their greatest ally is Donald Trump. And to answer my colleague in Washington, the reason we're talking trade war is because Donald Trump keeps using the term.
Okay. Well, that's a very simple answer. There we go. Clear cut.
Well, but I would say let us not be guided by President Trump's use of terms. Let us be guided by actual definitions.
Got it. Mr. Yuan, Belt and Road Initiative. Of course, that could be a platform, could be a strategy, but eventually, how is China's grand structure that you talked about at the very beginning of our conversation likely to be linked to the Belt and Road? Your understanding here.
The Belt and Road Initiative now is the most popular terms to understand Chinese new diplomacy. Different scholars have different understandings.
There we go. Yours.
More than 10 or 20 different explanations for this. For me, I think the most authoritative, most accurate explanation of Belt and Road Initiative can be found in the report of 19th Party's Congress report, which used two very key words. One is Belt and Road Initiative provide a platform for international corporations, which means any kind of corporations between China and elsewhere in the world can be through Belt and Road Initiative.
I see.
Another keyword is that it's a new engine for the joint development. Because today, what we want the most is economic development. China's development, China's rise, we can benefit China's rise to the outside world. And the other countries can work with China through Belt and Road Initiative. We can develop together. So, platform for international corporations, new platform, and a new engine for common development. Those two keywords is the very essence of the so-called Belt and Road Initiative.
a lot of things to be discussed. There is a lot of things also coming from the press conference given by the Foreign Minister to be digested. But for now, I want to thank the three of you helping us a lot to understand the real essence of it. Yuan Peng, Ain attendant, Robert Daly, thank you so much, gentlemen, for being with us. Really appreciate it. And stay with us here on World Insight. Still to come on our program. We aim the spotlight on one of China's top female diplomats, Ambassador Zhang Qiyue, the Chinese Consul General in New York, on International Women's Day. She tells us about the power of diplomacy in tonight's Straight Talk from the two sessions right after the break. Welcome back. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Now let's go to Straight Talk. Yes, that's both the name and the style of our exclusive interview series featuring big names coming from all walks of life in China. A person, a talk, a day during the ongoing political season. Today, on International Women's Day, let's meet Ambassador Zhang Qiyue, the third female spokesperson of China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She is now the Consul General of China in New York. Before we listen to her insights and her stories on China-U.S. ties, take a look at this first.
China is the second largest trade partner of the U.S. Bilateral trade topped $580 billion last year, but strong trade ties are not without tensions, as the Trump administration last month imposed broad tariffs in a bid to cut the U.S. trade deficit. At a media briefing earlier this morning, Foreign Minister Wang Yi took a more pragmatic view of China's relations with the U.S.
Competition aside, China and the United States don't have to be rivals, but we should strive to be partners in cooperation. Trade war is never the right solution. In a globalized world, it is particularly unhelpful, as it will harm the initiator as well as the target country.
Despite frictions in the trade sector, the cultural and educational exchanges have become more frequent. China is the largest source of international students studying in the U.S. There is about one Chinese student in every 3 international students. Over 2 million trips within the two countries were made in 2017, 2.7% higher than that in 2016. China and the U.S. have 49 pairs of sister provinces and states, and more than 200 pairs of sister cities. Chinese traditional holidays are more welcomed in the U.S. In New York, the Chinese Lunar New Year has been listed as one of the statutory holidays since 2016. The New York Stock Exchange even holds a bell-ringing ceremony every year to celebrate the Spring Festival.
NASDAQ.
Yes.
Ringing the bell.
Yes. NASDAQ now.
Was it fun?
Yes, it was really fun. And it has been, I think, for at least 6 or 7 years. Yeah, that they always organize bell opening ceremony just to celebrate the Chinese New Year. And also that shows that the importance of Chinese business and business cooperation with China and with Asia. More and more Chinese companies are actually, very, very active, and they're making a lot of investment into the United States.
Ambassador Zhang, help us to understand this. On the one hand, you got a lot of warmth of relations going on between the two countries, as you just mentioned. On the other hand, there is a potential, some even say, trade war that is boiling right now. How shall we reconcile these two extremes?
Actually, the interaction between the peoples has never been so strong than now. You know, there are problems concerning the trade or other issues. There are always problems. But I think the most important thing is that there is a good feeling between, the peoples.
Well, what about the short term? We see a lot of problems. We cannot avoid these problems. We cannot just walk around them, but rather face it up. So here comes the thing. Whether we can mend the fences between the two, or we just can't. And therefore, we go very different and diverse ways.
Well, I believe that the two sides will have to work together. We cannot
Well, you want to work together, but they also take the other side to work together as well.
No, I believe the other side also want to work together.
What is helping you to do that?
There are different ways of, I would say, negotiations or consultations or dealing with each other. Some people wanted to put their bargaining chip on the table early, wanted to be at a very high bargaining position. But I think actually I would say that when you are negotiating with your partner, you wanted to resolve or finally settle the issues.
Yes.
I think, you know,
that's the end goal.
Yeah, that's the end goal. I would believe that today, you know, there is so much interdependence between the two countries, and there's so much trade and personnel, you know, exchanges going on. I don't think anybody wanted to ruin the current situation. So I believe that both sides will find the right way of dealing with each other and finding the solution to the problems.
The strategy used by one side of a negotiation could also become clues for the other side to react and interact. The only worry is that what the one side has said or done would not manipulate the other side, so that things would go into a vicious cycle. Do you have concern about that?
Well, I don't want to comment on anybody's negotiation strategy, but I think what I believe is that it is so crucial for the two sides to work together. Today, the United States and China are the biggest economies in the world, and so whatever their negotiations, their discussions will not only affect the United States and China, will actually have a strong impact on the world and the world economy. So I think the two sides fully understand the importance of having a good relationship, you know, because this is not only in the interest for China, but also for the United States.
So you're suggesting, Ambassador Zhang, this is a hiccup only, what we're seeing today?
Well, I would say that I think actually if you talk to the people in the United States, I talk to the business people, I talk to the people from the universities, I talk to people from, you know, different counties or even villages, you know, they all want a better relationship. Yeah, and also they wanted to learn more about China. I can also let you know another new development is that actually today in New York City, all the private schools have Chinese language. And so that means that a lot of the students in the States are learning Chinese language. I would say that 40 years ago, this is very hard to think about. You know, before,
hard to imagine.
Very hard to imagine. We have to learn English.
Yes.
And it's very, very difficult, or probably, you know, it's impossible for foreigners to learn Chinese. But actually today, so many people are speaking Chinese.
No wonder the granddaughter of even President Trump is trying to speak Chinese and learning Chinese songs.
Yes. I went to, you know, some of the private schools in New York, and I saw some 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds already speaking Chinese, fluent Chinese. So I think this is a trend that means something. You know, it means that there is a strong desire. And I think when there is a better understanding of each other, I think relations between countries will really improve.
Is it necessarily so? I mean, when you have a better understanding of the other party, you would necessarily think the other party would be friendlier to you?
Well, I think yes. I think actually a lot of the issues come from the result of misunderstanding or there's a lack of understanding. Well, I would say that China is a very complicated country.
It is.
It's a country that is quite difficult to imagine.
Right.
So, you know, we very much encourage more visits to China.
You're watching World Inside. Born to diplomat parents, Consul General Zhang Qiyue understands the importance of communicating with the rest of the world. In 1998, she was appointed the spokesperson of the Chinese Foreign Ministry, the third woman ever to hold that post. And 2 decades later, she's now the Chinese Consul General in New York. She talks about the tall order of explaining China to the world. This year is 40th anniversary of China's reform and opening up. Everyone here in this country is a product of reform and opening up. 40 years already. You yourself as well. You started when China was still very closed to the outside world, even though your parents are in the diplomatic work. So you see a little bit, you saw then a little bit about the outside world, but then things have dramatically changed. Tell me, how is it like for you personally? Let's begin with a little bit of recount of the stories. When you were a small girl, 14 years old, being sent to the United States. What was it like for you?
Well, at that time, it was quite a shock, I must say.
To say the least, I guess.
Right, yes, it was a social shock. And because the school environment is completely different from the schools that, we have in China. Just to give you one example, that in the classroom, the students can sit on the floor. And they can do anything, And so this is completely different, In our classroom, we have to sit still.
Yeah, sometimes put your hands behind the back just to be disciplined.
Yeah. So at that time, I thought, this is a capitalist way of doing things. And we are, I had a very strong understanding of a socialist country.
But of course, that was 1970s.
Yes, I went there
70s.
in 1974.
Yes.
Yeah, that was 1974, yeah.
You were sent there, you got a cultural shock, but then you were sent back again. I guess it's another round of cultural shock.
No, I didn't feel this cultural shock then because I was already 17 years old after, almost 3 years there. I was very much familiar with the Chinese situation, so I was very happy to be back. To see.
What a relief!
Yes, actually, I was. Other people thought, going to the United States was such a, good thing, but at that time I thought it was kind of a suffer. I was very happy to be back, and I felt that I was more comfortable, back
at home.
Yeah, back at home. Yeah, so there was not a shock then.
One of the career stage that most of us remember about you is not only your wonderful work in New York, but also your previous job as a spokesperson for the Chinese Foreign Ministry. That was like 20 years ago almost, if I remember right. How do you see this change of way of thinking and therefore the change of the way of explaining China to the United States?
Well, I must say that explaining about China is a very big task.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yes, absolutely. So I think you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you so much,
And also the English channel, I think, actually is doing really a great job. This actually not only diplomats should do, but I think everybody should, do in their own way. For example, I think a lot of businesses are now in the United States. And the fact that they're making a successful business is a very good example or good story that they can tell. So I often encourage our business people to talk about the China story and encourage them to take the social responsibilities while they are in a foreign country. I think many of the businesses are doing very well. For example, last year, Metropolitan Museum had a very big exhibition on China.
Were you there?
Yes, of course.
What are some of the exhibits you are most impressed with?
Well, it was an exhibition on the Qing and Han dynasty. But they explain the story very well, even though it's about historical relics. That period actually laid the basis for China and centralized China, and was a very good period to understand China. Where did China come from? How did China come, to this stage? So actually, some very important Chinese companies sponsored the exhibition. That, exhibition went very well. Everyone can actually contribute to explaining about China, to telling a good story about China.
Compared to your days as a spokesperson and where China is today and your position now, which is more difficult to explain to the outside world about China?
Well, it has never been easy. Yeah, it has never been easy.
I thought you were going to say it's always easy.
Right, but I would say that it's different because here, when I was the spokesperson, I would be, talking through the journalists, through the media. But while I'm working in the United States, I'm talking to everyone, to the business circles, to the think tanks, to universities, to students, and to, ordinary Americans.
So you really feel the temperature?
Absolutely. And I'm always very moved by people who really wanted to understand China and who have a really friendly, sentiment toward China and who really wanted to work with China. And so they see China as a friend. And so we feel that, we have to do more to actually get the message across.
I see the light in your eyes, Madam Ambassador, when you are talking about you are always moved by people from the other side who really genuinely want to create this friendship and continue it. Before we go, I always wonder when talking to women leaders, what about it? Is there anything that is different when it comes to women leadership compared to gender of the other side?
Well, I think that is a question not for me to answer. Actually, I think it's probably for others to answer. For me, I work as a career diplomat, and I don't really see much difference between a man and a woman. But if there's any difference, it's probably, I think, we are more down to earth.
Absolutely.
Yes.
High five on that.
Very pragmatic. And we work very hard. Yeah. And I'm also very passionate. And we do everything possible to try to contribute to this process.
I feel absolute commitment from the other side of this conversation about your contribution to diplomacy and also the relationship between China and the United States. Ambassador Zhang, once again, what a pleasure to have you on our program.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's words from Zhang Qiyue right here on World Insight with Tian Wei during the 2 sessions. Do tune in tomorrow for a one-on-one conversation with film director Dongting Lam, who helped the blockbuster Operation Red Sea. That's something to look forward to. Well, that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us, World Insight CGTN, into your search engine or check out our YouTube channel. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, and everyone on the World Insight team, thanks for watching. And tune in again next time for insights across China and around the world. Good night.